Welcome back. So, the next stage of analysis that I want to talk about is going to be recreating tracks. And we recreate tracks so we can learn what a great track sounds like and ultimately create tracks to the best of our ability. So, here we have a reference track that I chose, and right off the bat, I'm going to bring the volume down 12 decibels, and this is just so that when we recreate our track, oftentimes what happens is you will try to balance your songs to a track that has already been mixed and mastered, and this will cause issues down the line with our mixing and mastering. So we should be balancing our songs with a track that is at a lower volume, and this will just allow for better mixes later on. So let's just listen to this track. So there we have the basis of our track. And so with my method of analysis, I like to start with the bass and then move up to the mids and then eventually the high end. And we'll do this with two main tools. Usually all you need is a Maximus plugin, which you can find here, and then our MSED, so our mid-side switch. And sometimes an EQ can help too, but we'll just focus on these two tools for now. So when we're analyzing tracks, there's four main frequency ranges that I want to focus on, and the first is going to be the lows, and then there's two portions of the mids, the highs, and that will be the four main section. If you try to break it up any more than that, it can start to get a little too complicated, and if you try to do less, maybe like two bands, you're going to be missing sections. So I like to separate my bands into these certain frequencies, and it might be helpful to write these down just for future reference. So the first one is 0 to 120 hertz, and in Maximus we can just type in the value. 0 is the low end, and actually we'll just, since this is already on low, we'll just go straight to 120 hertz, and 0 will already be there. And then we'd like to solo that and make sure that's enabled. And if we look on our EQ, there is nothing above 120 hertz now. And the reason that there is a little bit of stuff right there is because of the way that the cutoff filter is. Make sure that this is on 24 dBs, because that is the band slope of the EQ. And if you don't know what that is, that would just be, for example, this EQ has a slope. If we set this to a low pass, actually let's do a high pass. Well, right now this is set to steep, and probably as steep as it can go. Gentle would be like 12 dBs, steep is probably around 24. And so basically what we're doing is making sure that these are as steep as possible, so we're really isolating that frequency range. So now I want to go into this track and I want to try to analyze it, and we want to make sure that we are in mono, so we're going to mute the sides, and right now I'm just going to take a look at the bass, and let's listen to what we have so far. So I want to recreate that bass, and how would I go about doing that? Well, I already drew the MIDI, and I'm going to open up our synthesizer. So we have Vital here, and I'll show you, make this the initial preset. And let's take a look at that frequency range. So let's reset this. So I'm going to try to recreate that bass. So it's definitely a very subby bass. I'm going to switch this to a sine wave. And let's see. We can go to our basic shapes. Now we have our sine wave. Let's listen to their track again. Okay, so I also noticed that there's some gliding in their bass, and we can activate this in Vital by turning on the glide function. I also want the voices to be 1, so it only plays 1 note at a time. And I'm going to make it glide a little bit more. Let's turn it up to around 1 second. Okay. And it's also going to be down a couple octaves. So let's bring it down. So that sub bass is sounding pretty close. If we wanted to, we could try to find a kick that's similar to theirs. But let's just focus on the bass for now. I am now going to level the bass. And how we'll do that is by just taking a look at Maximus, making sure that we're in the 0 to 120 range here. And we can check that we are. And then let's just check what R sounds like. So also notice that another thing about their bass is it has a sidechaining effect. And to achieve this effect, we can add a kick. Let's just try this one. so now we have our kick, and I'm just going to sidechain to this track only to our bass. I want to throw a compressor. Actually, I'm going to use a limiter, set it to compressor mode, sidechain, track insert 2, and if we bring up the bring down the threshold and bring up the knee, we start to get that pumping effect because we're sidechaining the kick to our bass. And we can adjust it to how we like. Let's listen to our reference. And now ours. And we also want to make sure that our kick is still routed to our master. That way our kick will come through the mix. Just gonna copy these over. All right, let's take a listen. All right, and now what we want to do is balance our sounds. So let's listen to our reference again and see how loud our bass is. And then let's take a listen to ours again. So ours is a little quieter, and it's because we have a little less harmonics in our bass. To add some harmonics, I'm just going to add a little saw wave. And now I'm going to try to balance them. And one way we can do this is by looking at our EQ. How high is our kick peaking? We can see it's hitting almost around 6 dBs there. Now let's listen to this track. So their kick, this definitely isn't as loud. So let's turn our kick down a little bit. And it does sound like their bass is still a little more powerful. So let's see if we can try to boost it, and I'll do that by adding some distortion. Now let's see how that sounds. Yep, that's way closer. Maybe even more. Okay, so that's sounding pretty close. Then the next thing we would do is move on to our next frequency bands. And so the next bands that we would do would be about 120. So we could just move on to our mids and type in, well, we could just keep that 120. And then our high, I'm going to do 800 here. And we want to match these frequencies. So there's very little kick in this frequency range for their track. So what I would do next is I'm going to add an EQ to my kick. And I'm going to make this a low pass filter. Bring it down to, let's try around 600, 500. So that's already sounding better. Let's listen before and after. The EQ. So that's sounding better. And then we also notice that our bass is a little too saw-like in this range. So I'm going to bring our bass down in that range as well. And I'm just going to use Vital for that. And we'll also start to notice that there is some more voices in their bass in this region. So let's try turning up the voices. Maybe it's not so detuned. And that's sounding a little bit better. Now, another thing that I notice is their kick is still a little bit harder or softer than ours. So we can actually go into our EQ and adjust that too as well. Let's just bring it down even further. All right, and then let's go on to our next frequency range, and that is going to be still in the mids here. We're just going to set the lows to about 800, and then we're going to set the highs to 5,000. And let's just see and listen if we can hear any bass in this range of the song. Probably not. So yeah, I don't hear any. So around 800 here, we can really cut out everything in our bass. So let's just do a cut of 800. And we can save this preset as, drag it onto our kick, and also kick it in that frequency range. And now we have a pretty good reference as to what our kick and bass sounds like. Let's mute Maximus. And let's listen to their track. Now if we were to go on and work on the high end, we would go into Maximus again and type in value. We would go from 5,000 to all the way to the top here, which is like 20K. And make sure we would select that. And we're not even going to hear anything because we've already muted the lows, but in this song, there are some frequencies. So what I want you to do is find a track and just start recreating the low end of a track using this method that we just went over, and try to get it as balanced as you can.